Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. As Red Bull tried to dig themselves out of this emerging crisis, the Verstappens revealed that GianPiero Lambiase, Max's race engineer's move away from Red Bull to McLaren over the next couple of seasons, as has now been officially confirmed, was not a surprise by any means. That does not sound like a great vote of confidence in the Red Bull camp for numerous different perspectives, but it does give greater insight as to what Max Verstappen's future really looks like. Some big Ferrari updates as well. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. Not really sure what Red Bull are cooking up here, but here they are in Madrid. Might be something to do with the Madrid Grand Prix or whatever. We've got an F1 car driving down some train tracks for some reason. It's all a little bit strange. Whatever. Red Bull are back to their best, maybe, on some respects, but certainly not back to their best on the track. We do have an updated Formula 2 calendar as well, because there was meant to be F2 rounds, I think, in Bahrain and Jeddah, but that's not happening. So they have actually moved them, so they can do this. It makes sense, right? Just align it a little bit more with the rest of the calendar. So we had round 1 of Formula 2 in Melbourne, round 2 will be in Miami then, and then Montreal after that. So these are the relevant dates of some of the Grand Prix in Formula 1 this season, and well, these are the specific ones where there will also be Formula 2 action across those weekends. But it does therefore remain a 14 weekends calendar, which is good. Of course, it's a big Formula 2 contingent as always. One of the key names, of course, being Colton Herta, having moved over this season with the intention to do well, get the required super license points to potentially be a Cadillac driver sometime over the next couple of years. This is Lewis Hamilton in his Ferrari SF26. Lots of Pirelli tyre testing going on at Fiorano over the last couple of days. I do have a slightly better video of it actually right about here at Fiorano. Now, Fiorano, short track of course, but this is only Lewis Hamilton in the car. Now, quite interesting this, because we know that historically Hamilton, not the biggest fan of doing all that much testing. Leclerc has done quite a lot of testing with Ferrari already so far this season, sometimes without Hamilton, but I think Hamilton definitely is more passionate and energetic about this season and the car that Ferrari have given him than we have seen him in some time. And it feels like, yeah, more time in the car, the better as far as Lewis is concerned. Right now, he's doing more of these testing than he certainly would have been doing in the past. Maybe he feels like any additional track time could be an advantage this season, especially, it's got to be said, in the wet. Right now, of course, they're using Pirelli's next year tyres rather than what they're using for this year, but we've not really seen yet what's going on in wet conditions this year with these cars. We don't know what to expect when we finally do get a wet race. I will say from the Ferrari perspective, they are probably better positions than anyone right now when it comes to what we should expect when we get some wet running. Now again, these tyres, as you guys can see, are not the tyres we currently use. So they've got, effectively, this is what they call a super intermediate, when you've got the typical components intermingled with the kind of wet groove in the center there. So anyway, these are next year's tires. They're not what we're using this year. This of course is a test, but still fundamentally they get to see how the SF26 goes in the wet. Pretty spectacular image as well, not gonna lie. So it's been Hamilton in the car yesterday doing 142 laps. The most notable thing about this image actually, which I nearly forgot to mention, was the front wing, because you guys can see the front wing here is in straight line mode, but the rear wing is still very much in high downforce corner mode. Now this is a mode that the FIA have determined is usable, not all the time, but this will be an option, right? Because as we know, these cars are very energy starved. If we have a wet race where all of a sudden we have to use no DRS, because traditionally DRS is disabled during wet races, then what are these cars going to look like? They're going to have no power at all, because the active aero is designed with the sole intention of coalescing to the power unit's problems. If you have to take that away for safety concerns, then it could ruin everything. So they've come up with a solution here where they can use partial active aero. They keep the rear wing in place, but the front wing can actually drop into active aero straight line mode. We'll see how that goes. But anyway, Ferrari have at least some testing time with it. 142 laps yesterday. Tried the new full wet and the intermediates with various variants. So maybe this isn't the super inter after all, whatever. They're testing some new tyres for next year. Hamilton did 142 laps yesterday. And he did, what would that be, 155 laps today. So near enough 300 laps Hamilton's put in over these last 48 hours at Fiorano. Of course, it's a short track. I think it's a 40-second, isn't it, lap record around there by Michael Schumacher. Obviously be slow in wet conditions. So Hamilton put in plenty of track running. That is key. And they will have got some data, right? Like in terms of who is best prepared for when we do eventually get a wet race with all the factors we've discussed, Ferrari should be pretty optimistic about their chances. However, the big day for Ferrari is in 12 days' time on the 22nd of April. So they're going to Monza for a 200-kilometre filming day, 2/3 of a Grand Prix distance, and they will test a ton of new features on their package. Monza, of course, is also a useful track to use, not just because it's Ferrari homeland, they want to go well there, but also because it's very energy-starved, so they should get all the information at the extreme case, really, of how these cars behave. The Macarena 3.0, 2.0, whatever you want to call it, we think they brought a small tweak to it, maybe for China, didn't really work, so they've got a better version coming, and a ton of other packages they're going to bring to the car as well. So we shall see, because it looks like the Macarena wing could be worth an awful lot in a straight line. We've talked about 5 horsepower at the bare minimum in terms of advantage, if they can make it work effectively enough so it still works when it flips back into place for corners, which is currently something of a concern. We also have a Honda update. So they are expecting major advantages from the ADUO, the ability to further develop the power units. They will get granted that. There's a feeling that they're at least 5% behind. It's probably worse, to be honest, than where Mercedes are. But if they're only 5%, it's unlikely that Ferrari are going to be at 4%, as we've discussed over the last few days. But again, depends how you're measuring this. Are you measuring this just ICE to ICE, or are you including the entire electrical components as well? That's when the measurement becomes a little more complicated. But there was also this report from Motorsport that the Honda engine is, remarkably enough, 30 kilograms overweight, in addition to being very slow. So some say that it's about 100 horsepower down, and that is possibly 50 or so from the ICE, and maybe something similar, maybe more, from the battery. Apparently, the 350 kilowatts seem to be pretty standard, right? Everyone gets 350 kilowatts from their battery, from their MG UK. But apparently not Honda, they get 300 maybe. So they're 67, 70 horsepower down on rivals in that regard, and their engine is 30 kilos overweight. It's like, yeah, you might say, well, Newey, you've not really cooked up a great chassis here. That, I think, still remains to be seen. And whether it's partly Aston's fault, chassis, whatever the case is, in terms of the way they've designed everything, there's no doubt that the team with the weakest engine right now by some way is the Honda. And I mean, it's not even just the weakest, it's also unreliable. It doesn't finish a Grand Prix. It vibrates like hell. It's like they were not cooking for sure with this one. And as Natchez reveals, as far as they understand, this 30 kilograms is currently added to the car's weight. So we often talk about the chassis, right? Oh, the chassis is 10 kilos overweight or whatever. Apparently that's where they are. Apparently the chassis on the Aston Martin is 10 kilograms overweight. And then the engine is another 30 kilos on top of that, where it should be. So in fact, the most overweight car is probably not the Williams, but is in fact the Aston. And, that's a shambles. Now, again, I think for Aston Martin, some of their fans might be thinking, well, we're actually not a million miles away, right? Like, roughly, the Aston has been, 4% off the pace? Something like that. It's not close by any means. But in many respects, I guess it could be worse, because if they are 40 kilograms overweight, there's at least a second and a half in that on pure lap time. If the car is way down when it comes to power as well, there's probably another second and a half. So, maybe their car, if they could magically fix the weight issue and the engine issue, would be, up there, would be right up there. Maybe it would be a candidate for top 5 finishes, something in that ballpark. But, right now, they've got a lot of problems to solve before we start talking about that. Let's talk, though, about this man, GianPiero Lambiase, and his counterpart, Max Verstappen. Some great images doing the rounds yesterday, because we did the video yesterday mid-afternoon, but it was shortly thereafter confirmed that indeed this is happening. And both Red Bull and McLaren went on to make a statement on the matter. So Red Bull say this: Lambiase to leave Red Bull in 2028. Oracle Red Bull confirms that GianPiero Lambiase will leave the team in 2028 when his current contract expires. That's a key thing. he had a contract, it's coming to an end, and he's not going to renew it after that point. But he says he's only going to leave at that point. The team and he are fully committed to add more success to our strong track record together. Good luck with that with the car that you've built this year. What was actually a surprise to me, given the timing of this, is that McLaren said, you know what, we are just going to put it out there as well, because we know that this is quite a long while away. And when Red Bull come out and say, oh, he's leaving, it was something of a surprise to me that McLaren just came out straight away and said, yes, we are going to have him. And in fact, they've made a statement here which will be painful reading if you are Red Bull top brass, because they directly mention and name drop other names they've taken from Red Bull as well. So they confirm GP will join McLaren Formula One team as Chief Racing Officer. So that is the title that they've come up with. It's worth noting that Andrea Stella right now does about 6 jobs. He's doing everything for that team. So it's understandable that there are roles available that he wants taken off his shoulders, and we believe that will be, in the short term, from people like GP coming into the team. Lambiase, an especially good example here of exactly that. So he's going to be the Chief Racing Officer, in many respects very similar to what he currently does at Red Bull, really. In addition, of course, currently he's Max's race engineer as well, but maybe that's off the cards here, right? GP, we even talked about some quotes yesterday, has heavily implied that he won't work with another driver that isn't Max, which makes sense, right? Now feels like the optimal time. Red Bull have collapsed. Max isn't going to win this year, at least the championship. Maybe they can somehow win some races or something, but it's not looking good at the moment. Max might even leave. So there's lots of reasons why, timing-wise, this makes a lot of sense for GP, but also he's joining in the same role as Red Bull, right? They're making him the Chief Racing Officer. That's where he is at Red Bull. He wouldn't be able to work with Max, certainly not for the time being. So what's the appeal, right? Like, what are the push factors? What are the pull factors? Well, we're going to discuss some of them in a second, and some of them I'm sure you can guess. Lambiase is the latest hire designed to strengthen and support the talent pool that exists, the team's ability to attract and secure top talent like Lambiase, and previously Rob Marshall from Red Bull and Will Courtenay from Red Bull, alongside the retention and promotion of highly talented people under the leadership of Zach and Andrea. We look forward to welcoming GP when his existing contract ends no later than 2028. And I think that final bit is a pretty critical statement, because I was quite surprised that they would announce this now, given we are April 2026. 2028 is a long time away. But they decided it was fitting to do so, and I understand that. But I think there is, I would suggest here, an intention to bring GP in somewhat sooner than that. And again, given you know that he's going to McLaren, the Red Bull want to keep, they will want to keep him around, because if they say, all right, GP, you're on gardening leave for a year, you think Max is going to take kindly to that? I'm sure he's not, right? So Red Bull might need to just keep Lambiase around as much as possible to try and hold on to Max, because, of course, that is their key goal. They've lost everyone else, so you've got to try and hold on to Max somehow, but that does feel particularly unlikely. And they say no later than 2028. So I think it's possible, or maybe not totally likely, but certainly possible that GP joins earlier than that. The other key discussion, of course, was, will GP become the new team principal at McLaren? As I said yesterday, I think that is quite likely in the medium term. But in the shorter term, no, Andrea Stella will still do that job. There is, however, a feeling of, well, would Stella in that scenario go to Ferrari? The feeling is like, no, that's certainly not a conversation right now, but, would you be surprised if top brass at Ferrari had thought about it? Stella, I think he worked with Ferrari for like 14 years, Italian, worked for Ferrari for a long time. Would he be motivated to finally be the guy to fix Ferrari? I'm not sure fixing Ferrari is possible, but you see what I mean, right? People would say, oh, why would Stella go to Ferrari? He's got such a great thing going on at McLaren. It's like, do you not understand the tifosi, right? This guy, he's Italian. Obviously, he loves Ferrari on some level, despite currently working for their biggest rival in many respects. And he worked with that team for an awful long time. So it's kind of understandable that at some point, Andrea Stella might think, okay, a return to Ferrari could be in order. But right now, that's not the case, and that's quite a long way down the line as a conversation regardless. These are, though, all the key names. That's Rob Marshall, if you didn't know that name, Jonathan Wheatley, Will Courtenay, Adrian Newey, Christian Horner, Helmut Marko, and now GianPiero Lambiase. This is like the entirety of the dream team in many respects, right? Like, you put Max Verstappen in this picture as well. Who else was there, really, like, of the key names at Red Bull over the last few years? Not many, and, maybe Pierre Wache, right? But, of course, that's not looking so pretty at the moment either. So GP is out the door as well, but the question really became, okay, what does it mean for Max? What does it mean for GP? Why is this decision getting made now? Because it's not like GP is going to McLaren for a huge promotion. Effectively, his role is the same, and he's not going to work with Max. So what's that all about? But apparently, a significantly higher salary. That is thing number one. We also know that GP has had some personal things to deal with. We know that he's been back home. I think it was said publicly that his wife was suffering with breast cancer. It wasn't like announced publicly, but it was revealed publicly and people started to talk about it. We did a video on it before, so I'll mention it again because it's already, I think, in the public domain. So we can only hope that everything is improving personally for GP, but in the context of whatever personal difficulties that he was clearly going through and missed races for over the last season or so, a significantly higher salary to make sure that he's absolutely in great position to take care of his family to the greatest extent does make an awful lot of sense, especially if it is true that there are rumours that he has a contract that says at McLaren, we will give you that team principal promotion at some point, and if we don't, you are going to get paid millions of dollars to compensate, and that's obviously quite compelling. But of course, Max and GP have an incredibly strong bond and relationship. This would not be a conversation which was made in isolation. GP would of course have talked to Max about this and said, look, I've got this opportunity, what do you think about it? It's not something that either party would have wanted to happen at the middle of last season because they were going through a potential title battle, but this year that's clearly not the case. So all of a sudden the story has changed, right? We know that GP was approached, there was interest in him over the winter break, but I think now they've hit the ground and realised that Red Bull aren't where they want to be and probably won't get there anytime soon. That's been the final push, really. And Jos Verstappen says, we knew, as in himself and Max, and we also knew when it was going to happen. We have another year and a half to maybe even 2 years to work with him, so that's what he's got on his contract, so we'll see. But Jos says it's a huge opportunity for him, so we understand. We also told him to do it and grab it with both hands. So clearly, whatever he's been offered is pretty spectacular. And they have GP's best interest at heart, and they also realise that, like, the Red Bull dream is cooked, like, it's over, right? The team they had is gone, it's not coming back, and if GP staying felt like it was going to arrest that decline, then maybe they would have been on board. But they know that they have, Max certainly has GP's best interests at heart. And if GP was thinking about taking this offer and is like, Max, what do you think? And Max is like, mate, like, don't turn that down. Go for it, absolutely. That's a decision that's been made personally, but also in a world where there was some future that Red Bull still magically works, then they probably think about it more, or they probably don't do it, or whatever. But I think this clearly shows both sides of the puzzle, right? That, yeah, plenty of push factors or plenty of pull factors from McLaren, but plenty of push factors as well, even including Max and Jos, who are like, yeah, GP, please go and do it. It'd be a no-brainer to say no to that type of deal. It's up to Red Bull to replace him. Things have changed after 4 championships together, but I do think Max will continue, he says. It looks like F1 are going to change the rules. Lots of drivers and fans are complaining they're going to have to do something, which they will. There aren't any conclusions yet from yesterday's meeting. They did have a meeting. They confirmed that ideas were discussed in terms of changing the regulations to make things better, but they're not going to make any concrete decisions until their next meeting, I think on the 20th of April. That is the next deadline to keep in mind. But even the Daily Mail say that McLaren had an astronomical offer for Lambiase. Verstappen said it was a no-brainer, and that's what they have decided to do as a result. But can Red Bull find anything, right? Can they do enough to somehow keep Max Verstappen around here? Or is he going to take a sabbatical? Is he potentially going to go and join GP at McLaren at some point? Isaac Hadjar even says this: last year's Red Bull was difficult to drive, but it was quick. This year's is difficult, but it's slow. So, it doesn't really get any more decisive than that. And even Jenson Button, who it's pretty funny coming from Button, given that he is an ambassador for Aston Martin, who have the worst car. But he isn't wrong when he says, look, my advice to them is fix the car, make the car faster, fix your effing car. Because if they make a better car, everything else slots in. Max gets happier, the team can keep talent more, and I think that's quite clear, right? Button's suggestion is like, the car is slow, and therefore, and that's why we're seeing a lot of the things that we're seeing, in addition to all the drama over the last couple of years. So Max has basically told GP to go ahead and leave for McLaren. And that's quite something, really, when you look back at the career they've had together and the lack of a future duo-ship between that pairing, at least for the time being. So very much enjoyed your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Of course, they will stay working with one another for quite some time. Jos even said that Max is not going to leave yet, but GP will. So, it will still happen for some time to come, but that will then shortly thereafter come to a close. So very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.